Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to my channel. I am Eleanor Matthews, and the story you just experienced is my own true journey of heartbreak and healing. If this tale of a mother's strength and the power of second chances moved you, please let me know by hitting that like button, subscribing for more stories of redemption, and commenting below with where you're watching from. This story is more than just my personal vindication. It is a powerful reminder that our greatest setbacks can become our greatest strengths, and that holding on to love and forgiveness, even in the face of deep betrayal, is the only path to true peace and fulfillment. Let it inspire you to never underestimate your own resilience and to always believe that it is never too late for redemption. My 3 sons stood at my doorstep with packed suitcases, their wives smirking behind them. "Mom, we found you a nice place at the senior home," my eldest son Michael said, not meeting my eyes. "It's time for you to go." My heart shattered into a million pieces as I looked at the boys I had raised alone, sacrificed everything for, loved more than life itself. But when the director of that senior home saw me walk through the doors, her face went pale and she whispered, "Mrs. Eleanor Matthews, what are you doing here?" That's when my sons realized they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. If you're watching this true story, hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happens next will prove that a mother's strength can never be underestimated, and karma always finds its way back. The conference room was packed that day, 15 years after they abandoned me. My 3 sons sat nervously in the lobby of Matthews Industries, the massive tech company that had become a household name across America. They were here for job interviews, desperate for employment after their lives had fallen apart. Michael, my eldest, fidgeted with his worn tie. David, my middle son, stared at his scuffed shoes. And James, my youngest, kept checking his phone with shaking hands. None of them knew that the CEO, the mysterious E. Matthews who never appeared in public photos, who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, was the same mother they had thrown away like garbage 15 years ago. I watched them through the security cameras in my office, my heart aching despite everything they had done, because a mother's love never truly dies, no matter how deeply her children wound her. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the days when my life was filled with joy and purpose, before betrayal taught me that the people you love most can hurt you deepest. 25 years ago, I was married to Robert Matthews, a hard-working construction manager with dreams bigger than our small 2-bedroom apartment. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy, deeply in love, building our life together one day at a time. When Michael was born, Robert held him in his arms and cried tears of joy. "Eleanor, our son is going to do great things," he whispered, kissing my forehead. 2 years later came David, with Robert's green eyes and my stubborn chin. And 3 years after that, James completed our family, a surprise baby who made us laugh with his constant energy and mischief. Our home was small, but filled with laughter and love. I would wake up at 5 every morning to pack Robert's lunch and prepare breakfast for our growing boys. Robert would kiss each of them goodbye before heading to construction sites, working 12-hour days to provide for us. Money was always tight, but we made it work. I took on sewing jobs from home, mending clothes for neighbors, making curtains and quilts, anything to add a little extra to our budget. On Sundays, we'd all pile into our old station wagon and drive to the park, where Robert would play soccer with the boys while I set up our picnic. Those were the golden days, when love mattered more than money, when family meant everything. But tragedy has a way of striking when you least expect it. Michael was 12, David was 10, and James was 7 when the phone call came that destroyed our world. Robert had fallen from scaffolding at a construction site, 3 stories down onto concrete. He died instantly, they told me, as if that information would somehow make the pain more bearable. I remember standing in our kitchen, the phone receiver still in my hand, the children's laughter coming from the living room where they were watching cartoons, completely unaware that their father would never walk through that door again. I collapsed onto the floor, my hand over my mouth to stop the screams, because I couldn't let them hear, couldn't let them know yet that their whole world had just shattered. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and pitying looks. Michael stood next to me, trying to be brave, his small hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. David cried openly, his face pressed against my side. And James, my baby, kept asking when Daddy was coming home, unable to understand why everyone was so sad. That night, after putting them to bed and lying to each of them that everything would be okay, I sat alone in the dark living room and realized that I had a choice. I could fall apart, or I could become everything these boys needed. I chose to fight. The insurance payout from Robert's death was modest, barely enough to cover funeral expenses and a few months of rent. I needed income, needed stability, needed to provide for 3 growing boys on my own. I took a job at a local diner, working double shifts, coming home exhausted to help with homework and tuck them into bed. The boys had to grow up fast. Michael learned to make breakfast for his brothers before school. David took on the responsibility of making sure James did his homework. They became a team, looking out for each other while I worked myself to the bone to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. But I wanted more for them than just survival. I wanted them to have opportunities, to go to college, to build careers, to never struggle the way I was struggling. So I went back to school myself, taking night classes in business administration while working days at the diner. There were nights when I only got 3 hours of sleep, when I would cry from exhaustion in the shower so the boys wouldn't hear, when I wondered if I could actually pull this off. But every time I wanted to quit, I'd look at my sons' faces and find new strength. They were my reason for everything. Years passed, and slowly, gradually, things got better. I got my degree and landed a job as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm. The pay was better, the hours more reasonable, and I could finally breathe a little. Michael graduated high school with honors and got a partial scholarship to State University. David showed an aptitude for numbers and talked about becoming an accountant. James, my wild child, channeled his energy into sports and dreamed of playing college football. I was so proud of them, watching them grow into capable young men, seeing Robert's best qualities reflected in each of them. I worked my way up in that marketing firm, from assistant to coordinator to manager. I saved every penny I could, investing wisely, building a nest egg for emergencies and for my boys' futures. By the time Michael was 25, David was 23, and James was 20, I had managed to buy us a modest 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, paid for with my sweat and tears and endless sacrifice. The day we moved in, I gathered my sons in the empty living room and said, "This is our home. Your father would be so proud of the men you've become, and so am I. We did this together, as a family." Michael was the first to get married. Her name was Vanessa, a sharp-tongued woman who worked in sales and had expensive tastes. From the moment I met her, something felt off. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. She complimented our home, but I could see her mentally cataloging everything, assessing its value. "Michael's told me so much about you, Eleanor," she said, her voice sweet but somehow condescending. "It must have been so hard raising 3 boys alone. You're quite the survivor." The word survivor felt like an insult coming from her perfectly glossed lips, as if survival was something to be pitied rather than celebrated. Michael was head over heels, blind to anything but Vanessa's beauty and charm. They got married in a lavish ceremony that I helped pay for, even though it stretched my finances thin. Vanessa wanted the perfect wedding, and Michael wanted to make her happy, and I wanted my son to start his marriage on the right foot. At the reception, Vanessa barely acknowledged me, too busy networking with her wealthy friends, making sure everyone knew she had married up from her own humble beginnings. I watched my son dance with his new wife and felt a cold knot of worry forming in my stomach. David got married a year later to Christine, a woman who seemed nice enough at first, but revealed her true nature slowly over time. Christine came from money, old family wealth, and she never let anyone forget it. She tolerated me with polite coldness, speaking to me in that careful tone people use when they're being nice out of obligation rather than genuine warmth. "David's told me how you worked so hard for them," she said once, and then added, "It's wonderful that you were able to provide the basics." The basics. As if keeping 3 children fed, clothed, educated, and loved after their father died was just providing the basics. James, my baby, was the last to marry. Her name was Rachel, and she was perhaps the worst of all because she pretended to like me. She'd hug me and call me mom and compliment my cooking, but I'd catch her rolling her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Hear her whispering to James about how outdated my furniture was. How embarrassing my simple lifestyle must be for him. "We need to help your mom update her look," she told James once, loud enough for me to hear. "She dresses like she's 70 when she's only 55. Once all 3 sons were married, the changes began. Subtle at first, but growing more obvious with each passing month. Michael started canceling our weekly Sunday dinners. "Sorry, Mom. Vanessa has plans for us." David stopped calling me every evening like he used to. "Christine thinks I'm too attached to you. She says I need to focus on our marriage." And James, my youngest, my baby who used to tell me everything, became distant and distracted. Rachel wants us to spend weekends with her family instead. The house that had once been filled with my son's presence became quieter and quieter. I'd cook dinner for 4 out of habit, forgetting that it was just me now, that my boys had moved on to their own lives, their own families. I understood that this was natural, that children grow up and create their own homes, but something felt wrong about how completely they were cutting me out. It wasn't gradual independence. It was deliberate exclusion. Then came the family meeting. Michael called and asked me to come to his house for dinner. Said all 3 brothers and their wives would be there, that they needed to discuss something important. I arrived with homemade apple pie, my specialty, hoping this was a sign that things were getting back to normal. But the moment I walked in and saw the 6 of them sitting around the dining table with serious faces, I knew something was very wrong. "Mom, sit down," Michael said, gesturing to the chair they'd left empty at the end of the table. I sat, clutching my purse, looking at the faces of my 3 sons and seeing strangers. Vanessa spoke first, her voice cold and businesslike. "Eleanor, we've been discussing your situation, and we think it's time for some changes. You're living alone in that big house, and at your age, it's not safe or practical. We've found a lovely senior living community where you'll have people around, activities, proper care." My heart started pounding. Senior living? I'm only 55 years old. I'm healthy and independent. "I don't need—" Christine cut me off, her tone sharp. "Eleanor, let's be realistic. You're not getting any younger, and that house is too much for you to maintain. Plus, frankly, it's sitting on valuable property. It would be better utilized if what?" I asked, my voice shaking. David couldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. "Mom, we think you should sell the house. The money could be put to better use, invested properly, used to help all of us as a family." Rachel nodded eagerly. "And you wouldn't have to worry about bills or maintenance or anything. The senior home has a meal plan and activities. You'd be much happier there." I looked at my sons, really looked at them, and saw what I'd been refusing to see for months. They weren't worried about me. They wanted my house, my assets, the modest wealth I'd built through decades of sacrifice. Their wives had poisoned them against me, turned them greedy and cold, and they were too weak to resist. "I built that house for us," I said quietly, tears building behind my eyes. "I worked myself to exhaustion to buy it, to give you boys a home, a foundation. And now you want to take it from me?" Michael had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Vanessa's hand on his arm kept him silent. David stared at the table. James opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again under Rachel's warning glare. "We've already looked into senior homes in the area," Vanessa continued, sliding a brochure across the table. "This one, Sunset Meadows, has an opening. We think you should take it. We'll help you pack and move. It's really for the best." I stood up on shaking legs, leaving the pie untouched on the table. "I raised you better than this," I said, my voice breaking. "Your father would be ashamed." Michael flinched. But none of them said anything as I walked out of that house, drove home alone, and cried until I had no tears left. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure intensified. My sons called constantly, sometimes sweet-talking, sometimes impatient, always pushing me toward this decision that wasn't really mine to make. Their wives had convinced them that I was being selfish, that I was clinging to material possessions instead of thinking about what was best for everyone. Vanessa even showed up at my door with real estate agents trying to get me to sign listing papers. "Think about it, Eleanor. You could split the money with the boys, help them start businesses, buy better homes. Isn't that what a good mother would do?" I realized then that this wasn't going to stop. They were going to keep pushing until I gave in, until I had nothing left. So I made my own plan. I contacted a lawyer and quietly transferred ownership of my house into an irrevocable trust, protecting it from being sold without my explicit consent. I opened new bank accounts they didn't know about and moved my savings there. And then, one morning, I packed a single suitcase with my essentials, left a note on the kitchen table that said simply, "I'm going where I'm wanted," and drove away from that house, away from my sons, away from the life I'd built for a family that no longer valued me. I ended up at Hope Haven, a combination senior center and orphanage on the outskirts of the city. It was run by a kind woman named Margaret, who didn't ask questions when I showed up asking if they needed help. "We always need volunteers," she said warmly, "especially someone with business experience." I started working there, helping with administration, organizing fundraisers, spending time with the elderly residents and the orphaned children, and something unexpected happened. I found peace. The children at Hope Haven reminded me of my own boys at that age, full of energy and hope and need for love. The seniors reminded me that I wasn't old, wasn't used up, that I still had so much to offer. I threw myself into improving the facility, using my business skills to secure grants and donations, reorganizing their outdated systems, making Hope Haven run more efficiently. Margaret was amazed at the transformation. "Eleanor, you're a miracle worker. Where did you learn all this?" "From raising 3 boys and fighting to give them a future," I said. "I just never thought I'd be using those skills anywhere but with my own family." Margaret squeezed my hand. "Family isn't always blood, my dear. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand by you." 6 months after leaving my sons, I was having coffee with Margaret when she mentioned her frustration with Hope Haven's funding situation. "We're always scrambling for donations, always one crisis away from closing. These kids and seniors deserve better, but I don't have the business expertise to create something sustainable." An idea sparked in my mind, one that grew stronger over the following weeks. I had savings, investments, business knowledge, and nothing left to lose. Why not start something of my own? something that could support Hope Haven and other facilities like it. I spent months researching, planning, developing a business model. I wanted to create a tech company that would develop software for nonprofit organizations, helping them manage their operations more efficiently. It would be affordable for them, but still profitable enough to sustain itself and fund charitable work. I named it Matthews Industries, using my late husband's name, honoring the man who had believed in family and hard work and integrity. I rented a small office space, hired 2 young programmers who believed in my vision, and we started building. Those first 2 years were brutal, working 18-hour days, facing constant setbacks, doubting myself every single day. But I had been through worse. I had survived losing my husband, raising 3 boys alone, and being betrayed by those same boys. Building a business was hard, but it didn't break my heart the way losing my sons had. The breakthrough came in year 3 when a major nonprofit organization tried our software and loved it. Their endorsement led to others, and suddenly Matthews Industries was growing faster than I'd imagined possible. I hired more staff, expanded our services, moved into a larger office. Every employee was treated with respect and paid fair wages with excellent benefits. I created a workplace culture based on the values I'd raised my sons with: integrity, hard work, loyalty, and caring for others. By year 5, Matthews Industries was a multi-million-dollar company. By year 10, we'd gone international. And by year 15, we were a billion-dollar corporation with over 3,000 employees worldwide. I remained intensely private, never doing interviews, never appearing in public as the CEO. The business world knew E. Matthews existed, but not what I looked like or anything about my personal story. I preferred it that way. I poured all the love I'd once given to my sons into my company and into Hope Haven, which I'd been quietly funding for years, transforming it from a struggling facility into a state-of-the-art center. I never heard from my sons during those 15 years. Not a call, not a letter, nothing. I hired a private investigator once, just to make sure they were alive and safe, and learned that all 3 marriages had fallen apart. Vanessa had divorced Michael after cheating on him with a wealthier man, taking half of everything he had. Christine had left David when he lost his job, claiming she couldn't be married to someone without ambition. And Rachel had simply vanished one day, emptying their joint bank account and leaving James with nothing but debt. My sons were struggling, working dead-end jobs, living in small apartments, dealing with the consequences of chasing money over love. Part of me ached for them, wanted to reach out and help. But another part of me, the part that had been wounded so deeply, knew that they needed to learn this lesson on their own. They needed to understand what they'd thrown away. Then came the day that would change everything. My HR director mentioned that we had received over 500 applications for 10 open positions in our marketing department, including 3 brothers who all applied separately. She laughed. Same last name, Matthews, just like yours. What are the odds? My heart stopped. Let me see those applications. There they were. Michael Matthews, age 41, previous experience in sales, recently unemployed. David Matthews, age 39, background in accounting, laid off 6 months ago. James Matthews, age 36, various odd jobs, struggling to find stable employment. Their resumes showed a pattern of job hopping, financial instability, and desperation. These were not the successful men I'd hoped they'd become. These were broken men who'd lost their way. I sat in my office for hours, staring at their applications, wrestling with what to do. The logical part of me said to reject them, to let them face the consequences of their choices. But the mother in me, that part that had never stopped loving them despite everything, saw an opportunity, not for revenge but for redemption, For all of us. Schedule interviews for all three, I told my HR director. But don't tell them about each other. I want to speak to each one individually. She looked puzzled but nodded. And make sure I'm the one conducting the final interview. Michael came in first, wearing a suit that had seen better days, his hair graying at the temples, his face lined with stress. He sat across from me in the interview room, having no idea who was behind the one-way glass, watching him. My assistant conducted the initial screening, asking standard questions about his experience and qualifications. Michael answered honestly, even admitting his recent divorce and job loss. I made some mistakes, he said quietly. Prioritize the wrong things. I'm trying to rebuild my life, do things the right way this time. David's interview was similar. He looked tired, defeated, but there was a spark of determination there. I let myself be influenced by the wrong people, he told my assistant. I'm not proud of some of my choices, but I'm a hard worker and I'm loyal. I just need a chance to prove it. James was the most emotional of the three. When asked about his employment gaps, his voice cracked. I hurt someone I loved very much, someone who sacrificed everything for me. I lost my way for a long time, but I'm trying to find it again. I know I don't deserve much, but I'm hoping someone will give me a shot at redemption. All three were qualified enough for entry-level positions. My HR director was prepared to reject them in favor of candidates with more stable work histories, but I overruled her. Hire all three, I said. Put them in different departments so they don't work directly together. I want to see what they're made of. They started within a week of each other, none of them knowing that their brothers were also working at Matthews Industries, none of them having any idea who owned the company. I watched them through security cameras and reports from their supervisors, seeing them show up early, stay late, work harder than many employees who had been there for years. They were trying, genuinely trying to rebuild their lives. Michael was placed in sales, and despite his recent failures, his natural charisma began to shine through. He closed deals, built client relationships, and mentored younger employees. David went into the accounting department, where his attention to detail and mathematical skills made him an asset within weeks. James started in facilities management, and his work ethic impressed everyone. He volunteered for extra shifts, helped co-workers, and never complained no matter how menial the task. I watched my sons transform over those months, seeing glimpses of the boys I'd raised, the good men they'd been before greed and bad influences corrupted them. They were humble now, appreciative of the opportunity, kind to their co-workers. They were becoming the men their father and I had hoped they'd be. 6 months into their employment, I decided it was time. I scheduled a company-wide meeting in our main conference room, something I rarely did. The announcement went out that the CEO, Matthews, would be addressing all employees for the first time in company history. The excitement was palpable. After 15 years of mystery, everyone would finally see the face behind Matthews Industries. I stood backstage, my heart pounding, as 3,000 employees filled the conference center and thousands more watched via video link from our international offices. I could see Michael, David, and James in the crowd sitting in different sections, still unaware of each other's presence. They looked curious, but not particularly excited, just grateful to have stable jobs. My chief operating officer stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce someone who has changed all of our lives, who built this company on principles of integrity, hard work, and compassion. Someone who believes that business should serve people, not the other way around. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Matthews Industries, Eleanor Matthews. I walked onto that stage and the applause was deafening, but I was only looking at 3 faces in the crowd. Watching as recognition dawned as shock replaced curiosity, As my three sons realized that the mother they had abandoned, the woman they had tried to rob and discard, was standing before them as the head of a billion-dollar empire. Michael's face went white. David's mouth fell open. James started crying immediately, tears streaming down his face. Around them, employees who didn't know our connection applauded and cheered, while my son sat frozen, trapped in a moment of reckoning they never saw coming. I spoke for 20 minutes about the company's values, our charitable work, our commitment to treating employees like family. The whole time, I could feel my son's eyes on me, could sense their shock, their shame, their dawning understanding of how badly they had misjudged me. When the meeting ended, I returned to my office and waited. They came together, having found each other in the crowd, having realized they'd all been working for the same company, for the same person. My assistant showed them in, and for the first time in 15 years, I was face to face with my three sons. Michael spoke first, his voice broken. "Mom, We didn't know. We had no idea that this was—" He gestured helplessly at the opulent office, the view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, the evidence of success beyond anything they'd imagined. "You thought I'd be rotting away in some senior home," I said calmly. "You thought you could take everything I'd worked for and I'd just disappear quietly." David stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "We were wrong. So terribly wrong. Mom, what we did to you, how we treated you, there's no excuse. We let our wives manipulate us, let greed blind us, and we threw away the most important person in our lives." James fell to his knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, haven't hated myself for what we did. You gave us everything, and we repaid you with betrayal. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging for it anyway." I looked at my three sons, seeing them as children again, seeing the good men they'd once been and could be again. I thought about my late husband, Robert, about how he'd want me to respond. And I thought about the 15 years I'd spent building something meaningful, learning that success means nothing without people to share it with. "You broke my heart," I said quietly, and they all flinched. "You took the love I gave you and threw it away for money you didn't even get. You abandoned me when I needed you most, when I'd spent my whole life making sure you'd never feel abandoned." Michael was crying now, too. All three of my grown sons weeping like children. "But," I continued, "I've spent 15 years with orphans and abandoned seniors at Hope Haven. I've seen what happens when people have no family, no second chances, no forgiveness. And I refuse to become that person. Your father and I raised you to be better than what you became, and I've watched you these past 6 months. I've seen you working hard, treating people with respect, trying to rebuild your lives. You're finally becoming the men you were meant to be." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out 3 envelopes. "These contain ownership papers for 10% of Matthews Industries each. You're now shareholders in this company, not because you deserve it, but because I choose to give it to you. Because I'm your mother, and I never stopped loving you, even when you stopped loving me." They stared at the envelopes in shock. "Mom, we can't accept this," David said. "After everything we did? You can and you will," I said firmly. "But understand this. This isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. You will work for this company, earn your positions through merit, and prove every day that you deserve to be here. You will help me expand our charitable work, support Hope Haven and other facilities like it. And you will never, ever forget what happens when you prioritize money over family." Michael was the first to approach, taking his envelope with shaking hands. He fell into my arms, hugging me tightly, whispering apologies over and over. David and James followed, and suddenly I was surrounded by my sons, my boys, holding each other and crying and beginning the long process of healing. There's one more thing, I said, pulling back and wiping my eyes. The remaining 70% of my shares in Matthews Industries will eventually go to Hope Haven and other charitable organizations. You'll be wealthy, comfortable, but you'll never be billionaires. That money will go where it's needed most, to children who have no parents and seniors who have no family. You'll have enough, but you'll have to work for anything more. And you'll learn what I learned, that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the people you love and the lives you impact. They nodded, understanding the lesson, accepting the terms. We spent the rest of that afternoon talking, really talking for the first time in 15 years. They told me about their failed marriages, their struggles, their regrets. I told them about building Matthews Industries, about my work at Hope Haven, about the life I'd created from the ashes of what they'd destroyed. What happened to the house? James asked quietly. Our house that we tried to take from you? I smiled. It's still mine, protected in a trust. And you three are going to help me turn it into a transitional home for families in crisis, a place where people can stay while getting back on their feet. Just like I had to do after your father died. Just like you've all had to do after your marriages fell apart. We're going to pay it forward. Over the following months, we rebuilt our relationship slowly and carefully. Sunday dinners resumed, but now in my penthouse apartment, with my sons helping cook and clean up, appreciating every moment together. They worked hard at Matthews Industries, earning promotions based on merit, gaining respect from their co-workers, who had no idea of their connection to me. Their old house was renovated and converted into Robert's place, a family transitional home that has since helped over 300 families get back on their feet. My sons volunteer there every weekend, working with families, sharing their own stories of loss and redemption, teaching others about the importance of family and second chances. Matthews Industries continued to grow, but now I had my sons by my side helping me run it, sharing the responsibility and the success. They never remarried, joking that they'd learned their lesson about choosing partners wisely. Instead, they focused on being good sons, good uncles to the children at Hope Haven, who adopted us all as honorary family, and good men in their community. On what would have been Robert's 75th birthday, we all visited his grave together. My sons laid flowers and stood silently, each of them speaking private apologies to the father they'd disappointed. Then Michael turned to me and said, Dad would be proud of you, Mom, for building all this, for forgiving us, for showing us what real strength looks like. He'd be proud of you too, I said, squeezing all their hands, for finding your way back, for choosing family over greed, for becoming the men he knew you could be. We stood there together as the sun set, a family reunited, scarred but healing, proving that love really can conquer even the deepest betrayals. This is a true story, with names and some details changed to protect privacy. Eleanor Matthews is still CEO of Matthews Industries, still working at Hope Haven, still proving that a mother's love is the strongest force in the world. Her sons work beside her every day, grateful for the second chance they never thought they'd get. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories of redemption and justice, and comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply. Tell me if you believe in second chances. Your comments matter, your stories matter, and together we create a community that believes in the power of forgiveness and family. Share this video with everyone you know because someone out there needs to hear that it's never too late to make things right. That love is stronger than betrayal, and that mothers never give up on their children no matter what. God bless you all, and remember, the family we build through forgiveness is often stronger than the family we're born into.